Imagine standing in a gown so wide it could block a doorway, your waist squeezed tight by steel and laces, every breath a calculated effort. To the outside world, you are the picture of grace and beauty. But beneath the silk, lace, and towering hoops lies a secret world that very few dared to speak of. Victorian women weren't just dressing for fashion. They were entering daily battles of balance, strategy, and patience. And hidden within all this elegance was one challenge greater than any other: how to manage the most basic of human needs. This isn't the story you'll find in glossy portraits or royal ballads. It's the untold side of history, the chamber pots tucked in fine furniture, the clever garments invented for survival, and the quiet strength of women who turned necessity into art. Welcome to the secret routines behind the hoop skirt. Before a Victorian woman could even think about her day, she had to step into a process that was closer to construction than simple dressing. Her clothing wasn't just fabric, it was a carefully layered system designed to shape, restrict, and impress. The first layer was the linen shift, a thin, simple garment worn against the skin. Its purpose was not beauty, but practicality, protecting the outer clothing from sweat and oils. Over this came the corset, the defining piece of Victorian fashion. Stiffened with whalebone or steel, it cinched the waist into dramatic curves. For many women, the corset was worn so tightly that deep breathing became a luxury. Next came the petticoats, not one or two, but sometimes half a dozen. These created warmth, modesty, and volume. But the centerpiece was the crinoline, a cage of steel hoops that expanded skirts into a perfect circle, sometimes 6 feet across. With this single garment, a woman's body became a moving structure. Every step, every gesture had to be calculated. What looked effortless in portraits was, in reality, the result of layers of fabric and steel working like architecture, an elegant prison that women carried with them from morning until night. Once dressed, a Victorian woman was not simply wearing clothes, she was carrying a cage of fabric and steel that followed her every move. Walking required constant awareness, skirts swaying wide enough to knock over lamps or scrape along walls. Sitting meant finding the right angle, spreading the hoops carefully so they did not tilt or collapse. Even passing through a narrow doorway could feel like navigating an obstacle course. But among all these daily difficulties, one question stood above the rest: how to manage the most basic personal need using the toilet. This subject was rarely spoken about in polite company, but it shaped the way women lived behind closed doors. Every layer of clothing added weight and bulk. A simple trip to relieve oneself meant maneuvering 20 pounds of fabric and steel, hoops. Privacy was precious, but practicality could not be ignored. For the Victorian woman, handling basic needs was not a quick stop in a restroom. It was a slow, deliberate process, a performance of balance, modesty, and precision. Beneath the grandeur of fashion, the smallest routines became the greatest tests of ingenuity. Behind the lace and silks of Victorian fashion was a small, humble object that made survival possible: the chamber pot. Though rarely mentioned, it was the silent partner in every household, the tool that allowed women to maintain dignity while trapped in layers of steel and fabric. Chamber pots were not crude buckets thrown under beds. They were thoughtfully crafted, often oval in shape, with smooth interiors that fit neatly beneath a hoop skirt. Many had handles for steady placement and lids that served more than one purpose. A closed lid contained odor, but it also acted as a subtle signal to household staff. This pot was ready to be emptied, no words required. In wealthier homes, the chamber pot was disguised in clever furniture. Elegant chairs hid removable compartments. Cabinets and wooden commodes blended practicality with artistry. What looked like fine decor often concealed the reality of daily life. For working-class families, the chamber pot was plainer, but no less essential. It was kept in bedrooms or tucked discreetly in corners, cleaned daily as part of routine chores. Behind the scenes, household staff played a crucial role. Maids moved quietly, collecting and washing, timing their work to protect privacy. Their efforts ensured that a woman's elegance in public was never disturbed by the realities of private needs. The chamber pot may have been simple, But without it, the graceful illusion of Victorian fashion would have been nearly impossible to maintain. Wearing a hoop skirt meant that even the most private routines turned into acts of quiet choreography. A Victorian woman could not simply lift her skirt and sit down. Instead, she faced a task that combined balance, posture, and strategy. First came the weight. With petticoats, corsets, and a crinoline cage, a woman carried up to 20 pounds of clothing. To use the chamber pot, she had to gather and lift the layers in a precise order. Inner petticoats first, outer layers second, while keeping the steel hoops steady. One wrong move, and the crinoline could tilt awkwardly or collapse. Then came the positioning. The pot was placed carefully beneath the skirts, often with the help of a maid in formal settings. Through small body adjustments and subtle shifting of fabric, the woman could lower herself just enough to complete the task, all without removing a single garment. No buttons, no zippers, only posture control, patience, and practice. At grand gatherings, retiring rooms were set aside for this delicate process. These weren't simple powder rooms, but fully staffed spaces where maids worked like backstage crew, assisting with placement and cleanup, while ensuring no hint of struggle ever reached public eyes. To outsiders, Victorian women glided effortlessly through ballrooms and parlors. But behind the scenes, their private moments were careful performances, each action rehearsed, refined, and perfected into an art of survival beneath steel hoops and lace. One of the more surprising truths about Victorian fashion is that, for much of the era, many women did not wear what we would call underwear. The sheer size of the skirts was considered modest enough, and with so many layers, it was thought unnecessary to add yet another garment beneath. But this choice came with its risks. A sudden gust of wind could flip a hoop skirt inside out, leaving a woman dangerously exposed in the middle of a busy street. These accidents were so common and so embarrassing that society eventually sought a solution. That solution was the invention of split drawers. Unlike modern underwear, these were not closed garments. They were essentially two pant legs joined at the waistband, but open through the middle seam. This design allowed women to maintain modesty while walking or sitting, yet still made toilet use possible without undressing or removing heavy skirts. For many women, split drawers were a small revolution. They offered both dignity and practicality, making it easier to navigate the complexities of daily life in layers of steel and fabric. What started as an awkward necessity became a clever balance of modesty and convenience. Behind the polished image of Victorian elegance was a world of daily hygiene challenges. Toilet paper, as we know it today, was not widely available for most of the 19th century. Instead, people used whatever was practical. Working-class families often relied on scraps of newspaper, catalogue pages, or even natural materials like soft leaves. In wealthier homes, small squares of linen cloth were used, washed, and reused, offering a more refined, though labor-intensive solution. Laundry was equally important. Since outer gowns were delicate and difficult to wash, it was the inner layers, linen shifts, chemises, and split drawers that absorbed most of the wear. These were laundered more regularly, protecting the expensive garments on top. Menstruation brought its own challenges. Without modern pads or disposable products, women often created their own cloth systems. A belt around the waist held folded flannel or cotton pads in place. Some even turned to natural fillers like moss or wool for absorbency. These materials had to be changed frequently, cleaned carefully, and reused month after month. Though little was written about these routines, they were passed quietly from mother to daughter or managed with the discreet help of maids. Hygiene was not just about comfort, it was about maintaining dignity in a world where appearances mattered more than almost anything. To the outside world, a Victorian woman appeared as the very symbol of elegance. She glided across polished floors, her hoop skirt swaying like a bell, her corset shaping her into the fashionable silhouette of the age. Guests at dinners and dances saw only beauty, poise, and control. But beneath that polished surface was constant calculation. Every step required awareness of skirts and hoops. Every gathering meant planning for private moments that no one dared to mention. The chamber pot, the split drawers, the discreet help of maids, all of it was hidden behind smiles and small talk. Victorian fashion was not just clothing, it was a performance. Women became actresses in their own lives, maintaining composure, while managing routines that were anything but simple. Behind the lace and steel was a story of resilience, discipline, and quiet strength. Behind every sweeping skirt and polished smile, Victorian women carried a hidden world of effort. Their fashion was breathtaking, but it demanded planning, patience, and clever adaptations just to manage life's simplest needs. The chamber pot, the split drawers, the layers of washable linen, all were tools of survival, quietly woven into daily routines. These women were more than fashion icons. They were experts in endurance. They turned necessity into an art form, balancing elegance with struggle. When we look back at their gowns today, we see beauty. But behind that beauty was resilience, grace, and astonishing strength.